This week's episode of the ArtTactic podcast is brought to you by ArtTactic.com, where you can now check out our latest report, the Old Masters Auction Market 2024 in Review. We take an in-depth look at the Old Masters paintings auction market at Sotheby's and Christie's last year. And don't forget to use the special podcast promo code PODCAST15 for our loyal listeners to save a 15% discount on this report and all reports on ArtTactic.com. Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. Today, we're diving into a still niche but evolving area of the art world, AI-generated art. On this week's episode, we chat with Nicole Giles, Vice President and Director of Digital Art at Christie's, to discuss their upcoming auction, Augmented Intelligence. Opening February 20th and running until March 5th, the sale explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and fine art, bringing together works from pioneering as well as rising AI artists. You can view the sale online now by going to Christie's.com. In our conversation with Nicole, we explore the fundamentals of AI art, how the market has developed since Christie's first auctioned off an AI artwork in 2018, as well as the significance of augmented intelligence as a dedicated AI auction. We also discuss the type of collectors who are interested in this work, the mix of digital and physical works in the sale, as well as some recent ethical debates surrounding AI-generated art. We hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks so much for listening. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Adam, for having me.
Absolutely. Well, for those that don't know, we actually used to work together at Christie's many years ago, so it's so fun having you on the podcast now as a guest. So I think a great place to start is really just by sharing some simple information about AI-generated art. I mean, I think most of our listeners have heard the term, but I imagine most aren't incredibly familiar with it. So can you start by explaining what exactly AI art is and how it's created?
Yeah, absolutely. So in very simple terms, AI art is really just any form of art that has been created in some part or enhanced in some way with AI technology. So any technology that incorporates machine learning in some way, shape, or form. In the fine art sense, that means it is not a shortcut to create mediocre images. It is also not a substitute for human creativity, as some people might assume. For all of the artists that I work with, it really does enhance their creativity. It pushes the boundaries of what they can do. AI art in the mainstream media, I think well before this sale, sometimes does get a lot of flack. I think generally what people may have heard is that AI artworks are text-to-image models, something like what you can get from a ChatGPT sort of program. And people are worried that it will replace humans or that the imagery from these systems are kitschy or oversaturated, glitzy images that people can just look at on their screens. And many AI artists, are doing way more than that. Most AI artists that I work with really use the term collaboration when they're talking about their process. They collaborate with AI to create something that neither would be able to produce alone. So, I think it's a really interesting part of that. And what we're really trying to highlight in the sale is the human element of AI art. And AI art can really manifest in many different ways, as tangibly and as outputs. So we have works that are video, digital, but also physical paintings, sculptures, prints, photography, interactive works, and a lot more. And then AI technology can really be employed in many different ways. So you do have the text-to-image models that are being used, like diffusion models, like Stable Diffusion and DALL-E that you may have heard about. But you also have robotics, you have poetry, you have GANs, and then you have other bespoke data models. And I think all of this really shows sort of why we decided to name the sale Augmented Intelligence as opposed to Artificial Intelligence, which is generally what AI stands for, to really show that AI, the way artists are using AI is to augment their existing artistic practices.
So I remember several years ago, I think it was in 2018, Christie's notably sold an AI-generated portrait, and it garnered a lot of attention from the press, and I can't remember what exactly it sold for, but it was a really big number. How has the market for AI art evolved since then, ultimately leading up to this dedicated AI art auction that you're having?
Yeah, so that was a work by Obvious, the collective, the trio collective from France. And they created, that was done by GAN, so one of the mechanisms that I mentioned before. So they use their own data models to feed existing artworks in the past and trained a model to then produce a new portrait based on learning prior imagery in simple terms. And that was the first AI created artwork to ever be sold at auction. And that sold for something like $430,000 USD, above a $10,000 high estimate. So that really broke records then. I think Christie's has really been at the forefront of art and tech since then as well. So obviously we sold that work from Obvious in 2018, but that same year we also hosted our first art and tech summit in London in 2018. And that's when we gave out for free at the time Robbie Barrett AI generated nude portraits that were claimable via a little card, like sort of looked like a credit card. And you could, scratch off or you could scan the QR code or URL in the back and claim that as an NFT. And only 30 or so of them were actually claimed out of the 300 attendees that we gave out for free. And that's why they're now called the Lost Robbies. And they're now selling for, I think 2 actually sold this week after we announced the sale, for almost $1 million each. So something like in the high 6 figures. So it's been a really crazy market, sort of how it's changed since 2018. But yeah, in terms of, Christie's has really been seeing that. I've really been seeing that since then. We sold the first purely digital NFT work ever, obviously, from Beeple in 2021. We built Christie's 3.0, and I think now we're doing this. And I think we've sold AI art sporadically in our sales, as I mentioned, since 2018. But this is really the first dedicated sale ever to be focused exclusively on AI art. So we've really seen the market and the collector base for this type of art grow since 2018, as well as, seeing a lot of support from more traditional arts institutions. So the Whitney had a big show of Harold Cohen, who is generally regarded as the first AI artist. They had a big retrospective of his work, specifically of his Aaron generated work, which I can talk about in a bit. We have a work from from that in the sale. And in the Whitney Biennial, they also had an AI generated work, which is also in our sale. Gagosian had a show of AI photography last year that was done with Dali. And then you've seen galleries pop up specifically dedicated to this. So I think the most well-renowned one and the most well-respected one is called Fellowship, and they are absolutely fantastic. And we've been lucky to collaborate with them on this sale as well. We're really just responding to market demand, and we've seen the interest really grow over the course of the last, 7 years since 2018.
I found it interesting that you highlighted some of the artists in your sale and the fact that they have been supported by traditional art world institutions. I think one of the key criticisms, or at least observations, of that NFT boom that came out after COVID was the lack of curation and institutional backing. I think that may have contributed to traditional art collectors being more reluctant to embrace NFTs, among other reasons. But with AI-generated art, perhaps stronger institutional support could lead to greater acceptance among traditional collectors. So you mentioned some of the artists in the sale, but could you expand on the curation process of the sale and highlight a few noteworthy artists that our listeners should pay attention to as they browse the sale online?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of how the curation was done, all of the artists that are in the sale have been exploring and experimenting with these tools for a while. They've all had prior market success. Many are already in permanent collections of major museums and institutions. So that's always sort of a barometer we look at across the board in all sort of new categories, or all categories, I guess, at Christie's generally. So the same is true here. These are not sort of people that we picked out that are super, super new. We've also been really fortunate to work with NVIDIA. I have a great relationship with the head of the AI art gallery there, and she's introduced me to some new artists that they have been working with. So I would encourage anyone to check out the NVIDIA AI art gallery website, and there's some really great artists there, some very established and some more emerging artists that they worked with. So that's been interesting. And then we've also, as I mentioned earlier, been able to collaborate with institutions like Fellowship, who, like I said, is a really well-respected AI, specifically AI art gallery. They represent a lot of fantastic artists in the space. And we've also worked with other great sort of galleries and artist agencies like Art Code and Bright Moments. So really some respected players in the space. We've been able to sort of partner with them to make sure the curation is really up to our standards. And then, in terms of a couple highlights from the sale. So Harold Cohen is like I mentioned, the really regarded as the earliest artificial intelligence artist. He conceived of his program called Aaron, which is a software program that he made in the late 1960s when he was at UC San Diego. He was actually a established painter in London before then, so he did have a formal sort of art training, and then definitely pivoted to this and was really sort of obsessed with artificial intelligence and human creativity. And this was in the 1960s, so it really shows the history of this movement and how artists have been thinking about this for a while. And so Aaron is the software program that he created, and then in order to generate the code that Aaron creates, Cohen also then built his own plotters and painting machines that then interpret the commands from the computer to then make the line drawings on paper with pens and brushes with color. So the work in our sale is from 1987 from that software program from Aaron, and it's a drawing from 1987. So it's a really, really amazing, beautiful work. We encourage anyone to look at it, and really historical, great example. Another great highlight is Rafiq Anadol. So Rafiq is probably someone that many in the traditional art community might have heard of. He had a work at MoMA for a long time last year. It's now in the permanent collection. It generated a lot of interest and foot traffic, and it was acquired by them directly, where Rafiq trained data for the work from all the images in the MoMA collection. And it was really captivating, beautiful. He makes these gigantic sort of immersive works. He's had a lot of traditional art institution backing. He had a solo show as well at the Serpentine. Jeffrey Deitch had a show of his exclusively about maybe 2 years ago. And so the work in our sale is similar to the one at the MoMA, and it's trained on data from the International Space Station. And in terms of the aesthetic, it looks very typical Rafiq. So I think clients and collectors will be interested to explore that one. And this one also, it comes with the hardware. So it's not just an NFT. It comes with the screen, with the computer to play the work. So it's I think probably more accessible to display and to house than maybe an NFT only work might be for traditional collectors. And then maybe two artists that you might not have heard of. Alexander Rebin is really, really interesting. So he was OpenAI's first artist in residence. Now he's an artist in residence at Meta. And he is creating a oil painting robot that will actually be painting in the galleries at Christie's during the exhibition. And the image that the robot will be painting is created generatively with AI, and it is tied to the bidding of the work. So every time a new bid comes in on the online sale, the robot will paint another section of the 12-foot by 10-foot canvas that is in the gallery. So you can literally come into the gallery, and the work starts at no reserve. So we're encouraging, anyone to place a bid. So you can come in, place an $100 bid, and see the robot paint. So it's really interesting. It's a really great technological feat, but also a very interesting commentary on the price of art and the art market, and sort of how how prices relate to size and of contemporary art these days. So that's a very interesting one. And then I think the last one I'll just mention is the duo Holly Hernan and Matt Dryhurst, who were from the Whitney Biennial. They are a Berlin-based duo, and they do more text-to-image model. So what you would think of when you type in, a prompt into like a ChatGPT type program, but they create their own text-to-image model, and this was trained on altered images of Holly, like exaggerating her features. So she has big red hair and blue eyes, and it's sort of this interesting commentary on your image in the public sphere in the digital age. So sort of these trained images, like what people would, how people view you on, when you search your name on Google, sort of what comes up. So that's an interesting work as well. And that's a physical diptych print this is the exact same canvas that was in the Whitney.
Well, those sound like some pretty unique artworks that you have in your sale, especially that robot you were describing. And I think an interesting aspect of the sale is that it includes not just NFTs, but also physical works like sculptures, paintings, and many other things. Do you think incorporating tangible works makes AI art more appealing to traditional collectors? And I should ask also, who exactly is currently buying AI-generated art? Is it primarily the same audience that collected NFTs, or do you feel the buyer base has expanded?
Yeah, I mean, digital art collectors definitely are naturally interested in this as well. They understand the tech and the process, which is sort of a similar type of barrier to entry to get over when you're dealing with blockchain-based works as well, that the art is sort of more than just the final output. It's also about the process. So digitally native collectors, I think, are naturally likely to appreciate that as well. However, there's also a lot of interest from the big tech community, people who work in this space generally. I think they also appreciate the process and understand that from just AI being naturally, infiltrated into everyday life. I think they understand and like I said, appreciate that technological feat, and so naturally are interested in this sort of aesthetic and this sort of art process making. And then, Christie's also launched Christie's Ventures a couple years ago. So we have a great community in that sort of VC space that we've also seen a lot of new collectors come to us through, and as well through our Art and Tech Summit. So it's definitely larger than NFT digital art collectors. And yeah, your comment on incorporating more tangible works. Yes, I think definitely like I said before, the breadth and the depth of what AI art can be is really interesting. Only a quarter of the sale is digital only artwork. So most of it is very tactile. You can really house it and people understand it a lot more. We have sculpture, we have really interesting interactive works, paintings, prints, photographs. It really shows the myriad of ways that artists can use AI to enhance their practice and their creativity.
So on another note related to the sale, there's been an open letter addressed to you and to Christie's that surfaced and is making its way around online, expressing concerns about this auction. The letter, in essence, it alleges that certain artworks in the sale were created using AI models trained on copyrighted works without permission. How do you or Christie's respond to these concerns and to the letter?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll answer it how I respond to these concerns, but I think that art sparking a passionate discourse is excellent. I think it's what art should be doing. And I'm very happy to play a role in fostering that important conversation. AI art has been around, like I said, for a while. So this is a conversation that has been I guess, happening in the background for quite some time. And it's interesting that it's coming into the mainstream now. And I think we're happy to help be the ones to push that along. At Christie's, like I said, we respond to market demand. So clearly the intense debate that has sprung up online, mostly on X, indicates I think that we're pushing the boundaries and onto something innovative and interesting. I think the outpouring of support, for the artists in our sale has been incredible to see. I mean, really, really big names have been coming out to show support. Artists like Jack Butcher created an open edition of the letter, and over 10,000 people signed it in the first hour. So, way more than people signed the other letter. Rafiq Anadol has expressed support. Beeple has expressed support, and thousands of others. And I think I love that, we really recognize that new mediums don't destroy other mediums, right? They simply give artists more ways to express them. It's sort of the age-old photography argument. When photography first came onto the scene, a lot of people said, oh, photography is not art. You're just pushing a button, and showing what you already see in the real world. Like, how is that art? So I think we're in a pivotal moment now, and I think we will be on the right side of history. And I think, to address directly the copyright concerns, and again, this is my personal view, AI art is not going away. So I think the regulation, needs to keep up with the tech advancement. And I think, first of all, the artists in our sale are the best and the most well-regarded artists using AI today. And I think for the open letter to directly bully those artists is not a great look for that. And the artists in our sale use AI in many different ways. Lots use their own data to train their models, like Sasha Stiles or Rafiq Anadol or Jesse Woolston, to people using robotics as AI. Like I said, Alex Revin, Pinder Van Arman, Sue-En Chung, another robotics artist. But a lot of artists do use the diffusion models, like the text image models. And in my opinion, that's an equally interesting use of AI. I think artists have been influenced by other artists for centuries, right? Like, this is just influence in the digital age. And I'd love to read a little quote from Claire Silver specifically on this topic, because I think, and Claire Silver, an artist in the sale and really a leader in this conversation, I think she sums it up. She explains sort of the debate really succinctly. So if you don't mind, I'll just read this short little quote. There is a common misconception about how AI works, that when prompted, let's say with, quote, John Singer Sargent, AI looks through its data set for Sargent's work, takes bits and pieces of it and cobbles it together into some otherwise nondescript cyberpunk concept art. That is not how AI works. This is how AI works. It learns concepts and images, insofar something not yet sentient can imagine, something new. So, for example, it learns that Sargent was a painter and that he often painted figures. It learns that figures are people, that people have 2 hands with 10 fingers, that fingers bend at joints, and that Sargent often portrayed these joints with this sort of lighting or that quality of a brushstroke. And it takes all of those things that it's learned and it uses them to create something new. That is influence, not theft. That is how our brains naturally work. None of us create in a vacuum. We are all the product of influence, and how we choose to rearrange and reimagine those influences is the sum of our taste, our choices, and our artist's fingerprints.
And so lastly, before we let you go, I want to get your thoughts on where you think AI-generated art is headed in the next few years. I feel like even outside of the art world, just every time I go out to dinner with friends or I'm reading the news, there's always some speculation about how artificial intelligence will impact broader culture and society. How do you think AI plays out within the art world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be more adoption to mainstream institutions. I think it's very emblematic of the time. I think artists, a lot of contemporary artists create with the current new technology of the day. And I think it'll just become more and more into, supported by museums and galleries and art fairs. And I think we'll see more and more artists using this, whether it's overtly as the output or it's just sort of in their process for art making. And I also think with the massive wealth transfer coming, I think the market is going to increase, I think. And that's the same for, digital art generally, I think, as well. Just all sort of art created digitally. I think, when the younger generation who grew up with digital tools and who are naturally digitally native have more, spending power, I think they understand the tech and they appreciate the tech more and they have a natural affinity more towards this aesthetic. I think the market from the price point will also increase.
Nicole, thanks so much again for coming onto the podcast and helping us preview your upcoming auction, Augmented Intelligence, as well as sharing your unique perspective on AI art and where this medium may be headed. If our listeners want to check out the auction, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, just go to christies.com and you will see it on the homepage. And yeah, we're also, please stop by the exhibition. It's a really fun, interactive one, also open through March 5th.
Perfect. Will do. Thanks so much again, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.